Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Charity Majors, and I'm so excited for our conversation today. It's with one of my favorite people, dearest friends, Lyndsie Schnoor. Welcome. I'm just like so excited. We always have such good conversations, so just I know it's gonna be good.
Agreed.
Totally. So for those of you that don't know Lyndsie, her and I actually met uh 5 years, 5+ years ago now, going on 6 years, in ministry school. And um we were in like only the way that God can do it. We were in every revival group, every like, class, every all the things always together for what was like a 5 year journey for in part-time ministry school when we did it online with Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. And it was an incredible experience. And I just remember like her and I really connecting, and just becoming really great friends over that journey, and just really bonding around the presence of God and just pursuing a like not a powerless gospel. Like we were both sold on the presence and the power of God and what that looks like in our lives and in the prophetic and in hearing his voice and in just pursuing purity. And we just like journeyed with each other through a lot of different things over the last 5 years, like a lot of hard things, a lot of good things, a lot of praying for people and each other and seeing miracles. And Lyndsie was one of the women who prophesied for me when it was like, oh, I before Eden, our little rainbow baby, was in existence, she was one of the ones that was like, nope, you're gonna have another kid. And I know we're not supposed to like prophesy dates, mates, or babies, but like this is what's gonna happen. And like she prayed for me and for our marriage and for my husband. And so she, and all of a sudden like gets to see our little walking answered prayer, got to meet her at graduation. And it just is like such a joy to see what God can do when he brings people together, when he crosses paths, and when he really like intertwines hearts. And so like in this like godly friendships series, I actually just wanted to like start with like the foundation of our friendship, but even like as long as outside of that, she's a powerful woman. She's a prophetic voice. She's an incredible worship leader. She has a ministry called Known to Be Known, a podcast called Known to Be Known. Her book, Known to Be Known, is amazing. Like it's one of my favorites. Go grab it for sure. Um, so now you know all the fancy stuff about Lyndsie, but now we're just like get to the real because our conversations are always so good.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, the electricity went off, the Wi-Fi shut down. So whatever is in opposition to what's going to take place next, we're both very excited.
I mean, it's good when like the power goes out when you're like starting the call. So Lyndsie, I would love to hear like just kind of your journey of like what it has looked like for you to navigate friendship.
Oh, it's so good. Um, so the first thing that comes on my mind for content for people just to have kind of an infrastructure for the importance for me, and Charity also knows this content, is something that Melissa Casey and Haley Braun put together that's called Checking Your Vitals. So all
Yes.
of the things that I'll tap onto, um, really were not new concepts as much as they gave language to the things that I have priority and value for. But friendships for me, especially in the last 10 years of navigating change with growing children, with intentionality, with your marriage, and still staying connected with the people that God brings into my space has been what does that look like? So it's intimacy and connection. And then where are the guardrails to those specific points of intimacy and connection? And how do you expand or contract them? Because the point, at least for me, is never disconnect, it's connection. But, and I'm sure Charity would even talk about this too. The tricky part of that is that what you see that as and how you see people within the realm of Haley uses the metaphor of being a fortress, and there's the inner gates that get closer and closer until you're in your bedroom space. Sometimes the hardest part as an adult, or maybe at any age, is that you might have somebody here in the outer courts that actually has you in the bedroom. And I have found it is less about connection and more about mitigating when people have placed one another in different spaces of intimacy and connection and still fighting for connection when maybe those particular entry points aren't the same in certain seasons, at least.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like even just to dovetail off of what you're talking about, we kind of went through some of that over this last year. Like we were like really, really close during the first few years of ministry school, and God even spoke in some really powerful ways about like covenant friendship. And we got commissioned together, like walked across the line, like holding hands. And then like for third year, so Lyndsie also did third year, I did third year, and there was a radical shift.
Huge.
And it was like a struggle for me to know, oh wait, but like God said this, but then all of a sudden nothing in our friendship looked like that. And so it was like Lyndsie went into like a super, super busy season with her mentor and didn't have the capacity. And for me, it was like, oh, I was actually like used to talking more on a regular basis and connecting more on a regular basis. And, it's like we would like Voxer each other or text each other. And then all of a sudden, like that went away. And I was like, oh, like I feel like I'm losing my friend. But there was also like in that space, like the Lord met me in such a beautiful way that every time like my heart missed you, I actually got to pray for you. And I remember even seeing on like God put you on my heart so much during like this certain like week or two period. And I remember then seeing on your Facebook that you were actually struggling a lot with some headaches and migraines and that kind of a thing. And I was like, oh, okay, like that's so cool that like God invited me into just being a friend a little bit further out in some of those layers of
Yeah,
friendships.
yeah.
Um, but that was something that was like, it was harder for me because I'm like, God, like you said this and nothing about our friendship looks like that. But it was actually like for me, the best way that I could be a friend to Lyndsie in that season was to give the space and to be in the space of where her capacity was at. And so that was like something that I had to like learn to navigate.
And same on this end too, I would say, and I'm very blessed to have very mature friends. So I would say that Charity and I could also recognize that you don't get to always have this level of maturity that you can
For
have
sure.
these really tough discussions, right? Because my struggle and where my heart was broke was, God, you said this. It
Totally.
doesn't look like this, but I want to fix it. And there was no capacity to fix. And all I could do in the season was say, I can't right now. And God's doing this. And you just have to trust me. And although this feels like it's like wrapping it up in a quick second, although it was almost a year, we're stepping into what I feel like is the timing that we saw a year previous, but there was one more year of shaping before we would step into the things God was promising, which I think is neat from a prophetic standpoint that it was at graduation that this was all spoken over us. And I felt the shift at graduation for third year, not second year, in this really cool way. So it's like we kept looking for something to look one way during
Yeah.
this whole year of shaping that God was like, just a second, hold up. And as an encouragement for, I think a lot of women specifically too, because we are inherently nurturers, we're inherently fixers, we're inherently wanting to make sure there's not a disconnect. When you can recognize the Lord's leading in giving space on one end and also allowing the space on the other, because both people are making hard decisions.
Oh. Totally.
that God's ultimately going to bring it back around. Like
Yeah.
he's good. He's faithful. Um, and I would say that one thing I knew, and it was really, really cool too, that I don't, Charity doesn't even know this, that I had multiple friends that didn't, that knew that we weren't talking a lot because they knew that I was generally like, oh, I have a phone call with Charity that were like, hey, God wants you to know that he's not done with you two yet. And I kept having these little, oh, I'm gonna get emotional. I kept being reminded in the pain because it was really painful. I didn't like knowing that I was causing pain when that wasn't my intention. And I know she knows that. I also think it's really important to be real in these conversations because even when we're trying to do our absolute best, you got to know that your friend doesn't want to hurt your heart. And I think it's cool that we have the opportunity to talk about this. For what it's worth, it's the first
It's
time we're talking
very
about it.
public. We're both crying. It's fine.
But I really think women need to give each other a break in the Christian
Yeah.
world that we love really hard. And it's generally people's intention to not cause pain. And if
Yeah.
you can lean into that grace and that mercy, um, even if it's not perfect, when God's timing comes back around, everybody's in a better space. And even after our last conversation of how we were both shaped in this last year with Bethel, I'm not the same person I was a year ago.
Yeah.
Charity would probably say the same thing, and we get to step back into friendship in a degree of maturity and relational perspective that wasn't how it was a year ago. So it was hard, it was painful, and I'm really glad that God is good and outside of time and knew what he was doing specifically
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love like part of like what God continued to share with me like through the last season where we weren't as close was, it's like, and I know Chris Valentin talks about this too, but it's like oh, God speaks one thing and he's like, yep, you're gonna go north. And it's like everything in your situation goes south. Right. And it's like only God. And yeah, so it just is like there's so much like I'm like I'm excited to almost like get to know you now. Um, but also like God just gave me like such a beautiful long-term vision of like what long-term friendship looks like. And it does look like navigating different seasons. And it looks like the ebbs and the flows of, oh, like you're in like the inner circle this season. And then other seasons, it looks like, oh, like I have to shift you out a little bit just because of capacity or where it's at. And it doesn't mean there's disconnection. It just means that we just get to navigate the ebbs and flows of the emotional and relational capacity. And I think what really like when I talk about friendship or even any relationship, there's typically is like the honeymoon stage and like you're really excited and everything is amazing. And then there comes a point where every relationship, every friendship, every even like if say your business is like this, right? It's this entity, your podcast, whatever it is, there becomes a point where it's disappointment. And it matters what you do with that disappointment. And if you heard a few handful of episodes previous to this one, I actually talked about like the season where I had to navigate so much disappointment and I had to learn to steward my heart in the midst of that. And it's like, oh, it actually matters like what I do with my heart in the midst of this disappointment that will determine like whether our friendship either grows apart or we come back together or we don't and we disconnect. And so, yeah, it just, I don't know, like friendship is amazing and it's hard and it's messy and it's not perfect. And I think that there are so many times where we actually get invited into navigating our hearts and friendship, apart and together. I don't know. It just is like this beautiful mess with people, but I don't
As
know
you were
where I'm going with
talking,
this. Feel free to
no,
jump in.
I picked up on a few things. Number one, don't let your disappointment create a narrative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that is an easy one. For people that I've just talked to in life too, that the first thing the enemy will come in and do when you're disappointed is say, well, that person sucks. That
Yeah.
person's this, that person's not that. This is how you're justified. And being aware, first and foremost, at least in my experience, is that I do not give a voice to disappointment.
Yeah.
If something doesn't go the way that I thought it was, or I don't understand it, I'll keep going back to God, but I don't allow that to frame somebody or create a narrative that is absolutely inaccurate.
Yeah.
And truly, that's not easy. It's very easy to be justified when your heart hurts, right?
Totally. I'm going to
Yeah.
interrupt you really quick just to be totally transparent because it's like, is this?
Yeah.
There were a couple times where I remember like it was literally like an attack, like the enemy just like whispering, like, oh, well, maybe you're just not supposed to be friends and blah, 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 blah. And just like, and I was like, oh, like this is it. And I was like so tempted to text you or to pick up the phone and be like, this isn't what friendship is, and you're a bad friend. Like, and I'm like, this is like so accusatory. This is not my MO. This is not like what my heart knows her to be. And so it was like this, oh, I had to like separate what the enemy was saying, like where he was coming into that space where my heart did hurt. My heart did miss her as a friend. And so it was like in those times where I was like so tempted to just write her off and like never whatever again. And I actually leaned in and prayed harder. And I prayed for her and I prayed for her family harder. And I like, like prophesied like to my pillow over her and all this stuff. And it was just like, it was these moments behind the scene. That it was like, oh, that I feel like there was something really like special that happened. Where it's like, gosh, like friendships can actually be forged, when there isn't, as much time spent or there aren't as many conversations. Um, when you lean into the heart of God and what He has. And that was like what really happened in my heart over the last season. So
I love you.
I love you too.
I I find it, I love patterns. So just listening to our conversation and knowing that it's common right now. Conflict resolution's a big deal in a world that
Totally.
wants to cancel everything.
Yep.
And I find it a privilege when God lets us walk through seasons where we're not only trying to figure out where we've placed our identity, but He's not going to give us the capacity to love somebody that we're not going to love well. And with friendships like ours, when you walk out of hard times, when you walk out of things that anybody could justify of saying exactly what you said, you're a bad friend, I'm out. Um, there's something really powerful about what God entrusts and those particular connections when they come back around because
Yeah.
it's no longer surface. He trusts your heart, like you truly love the person. And I don't know for anybody else listening, but I'm at a stage of life where I'm for quality, not quantity. Like
Totally.
I love people, but my life is hectic. I've got two teenagers. Charity's life is hectic. She's got two littles that are growing and becoming larger now. And when you are married and trying to do God, husband, mom, business, ministry well, you only have enough room and capacity to love like three or four people really, really well. And I
Yeah.
think that's the other lie for women is that you are not supposed to have everybody in your inner courts.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I love that conversation. I know you and I have had that so many times. And there is like capacity of the inner courts of someone's heart. It's like, oh, like there's actually like what you're saying, there's only capacity for like very few that get to that level. And then, then there's like all the friends and the fun, whatever. And then you kind of go into outward into the like outer courts where they're absolutely like, depending on the call that God has on your life, the capacity to host dozens or hundreds or thousands of people in your outer courts. But I find this conversation so, so interesting. And I'm sure you could speak to this, but something that I have had to like navigate through in multiple arenas. Like when I was in pageants, I was Mrs. Idaho, or when I had a TV show, or like even kind of like being forward facing on social media, or being a community builder, having a bunch of people, hosting events. Like people think that they know you more than what you know them. And they like what you're saying, even back to the beginning, where they kind of place themselves like in a inner part of more of your life. And you're like, oh, like I had people like a handful of years ago and I was doing multiple events and hosting a bunch of women's events, all this stuff. I had some people like get mad at me like that they didn't get an invite to my baby shower, and I'm like, oh, we've actually like never had a deep conversation, but because I was leading the room and we were hosting monthly events, they knew me more than I knew them. And so like was this really interesting dynamic of, oh, well, like you just like didn't invite me. Like, and I'm like, wait a minute, like what? So like how I'm like for sure still learning, like how do you do that well? How do you honor it well? Like I'm like, oh, like we actually aren't really friends. Like we are acquaintances and we've never really had a conversation. Have we seen each other a lot? Sure. Do you follow me on Instagram? Sure. Like, do you know some of my story because I speak in front of the room? Sure. But you're mad at me because I didn't invite you to my small baby shower with my closest friends. Like, oh, like what? Like it's so, I'm like, I don't know. Where's the emotional intel and the relational intelligence in that? Because I have boundaries and people maybe they just don't like my boundaries, but that's okay.
I'm trying to think of how in my experience, the first person that comes like to mind from like a scriptural standpoint is David, right? Like if you study the lives of kings, because I would say, or any famous person for that matter, like you can pick a Donald Trump, like let's be honest, you get onto Twitter today, any number of us could assume that you know some specific detail of someone that you have no knowledge of.
Totally.
You feel very aware of their life because you're being inundated with facts about it. I think that's another hard part of being in a technologically advanced age is that we are inundated with people's personal information when we don't have relational context. So
Yeah. We think we know people and we don't.
we don't. And I've learned, and I might not be doing this correctly, but with that kind of king analogy, um, what say like kind of what we were just talking about, I can't be responsible for people's responses to me.
For sure. For
I
sure.
also, those same people are not entitled to a reason why I have boundaries. So I want to say that again, wherever you're at, and especially as if you do happen to grow in favor and influence in your life, favor and influence attract just by nature. So as you learn to mitigate increasing favor and influence, you are going to have to deal with people that think that they know you and think they deserve to have more attention to you. And what are you going to do about that? And how I've approached it is that I'm true to who God says my people are in certain seasons.
Yeah.
And using that same metaphor for just 1 second, the people that are in my most like inner courts, like my husband's the only person in my bedroom, right? But my
Yeah.
like I'm right outside my bedroom right now. I might have 4 people in a season that are super aware of what's going on in that season, but people that I've trusted from past seasons that might come into that room and come out for a hot second. So I do also want to say, I'm not saying you're going to go through seasons of life where each time your inner courts only have these 4 specific people.
Yeah.
I'm saying that generally speaking, from my intentionality of phone calls and coffees and stuff, that might be 4 specific people with transient people that I trust coming in and out. How I deal with the rest of everybody is that I don't. I live my life. They have the freedom to decide if they think I'm a horrible person or my boundaries are mean or I'm not kind enough or not giving them enough attention. And ultimately, it really is a them problem. It's not a me problem. And a good tree bears good fruit. So I also am consistently checking in with the people like worship director, right? Yes, like at any church, if you happen to be in a leadership position, you have a lot of favor and influence in that church body. And from
Yeah.
a musician standpoint, everybody wants to be your friend. Everybody wants coffee. Everybody wants to serve on Sunday.
Yeah.
And learning that saying no to those things is not a reflection on kindness or gentleness or connection. It is a reflection on who God has told me I am in this season, who
Yeah.
has access to me that is safe, who has access to me that is actually growing me, and the rest of everybody will watch. And if I muck it up, then he's good. And I'm going to learn because the people that are my wise counsel in that season will tell me that I've mucked it up. But if you keep on flooding yourself with the people that need to be coddled or invited or affirmed, it happened to me numerous times this past weekend. Does it hurt? Yeah. But is it ultimately
Yeah.
your responsibility to convince that person you're a good person? No, it's not.
Right. Right. No, for sure. Well, I think that even like to touch on what you said, like, does it hurt? Like, I would actually be scared more if things like that didn't hurt my heart, because that to me would be like, oh, like I've actually like like walled off. My heart isn't feeling anything. That's not being like a heart led. Even Haley talked about this, I think, in the Checking Your Vitals course, where it's like, heart, why are you not
Yeah.
in this? And I remember talking with one of our revival group pastors, Lorianne, who she was on another episode, so go check that out. But Lorianne talked about how, because I asked her like how does it feel when you pour your heart and your life into this group of people and every year they like rotate out, and she said that God actually said that if it doesn't cost me my heart, like if my heart doesn't hurt when these people like move on, which is obviously you want that, like you don't want people dependent on you. She said, then I haven't loved well as a leader. And I love that because it's like, oh, like if something doesn't hurt my heart and not, I like, we don't want to just like have everything hurt our heart, right? Like, don't hear what I'm not saying. But yeah, there's just this space to where like this girl was in my, kind of events and somewhat in my outer court circle type of a thing. So my heart did hurt for her that that's like what happened in the situation. But yeah, like what you said, like I couldn't convince her that I was a good person or any of that stuff. But it's interesting. So when it comes to friendships, what have you learned? Like what were maybe some of the hard lessons that you had learned? Maybe like what not to do, or what were some of the hard lessons in friendships that you had to learn?
Oh, Holy Spirit, man, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
I think I have one specific scenario that was probably like, okay, if my son is 17, it was probably like 10 years ago that I learned that you can't fight to keep somebody that God does not have in your life anymore. And I was to a fault, a pleaser and connector that I didn't recognize that people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And none of those are bad. But if you hold on to people that are not supposed to be in your life, you're not just harming yourself, you're harming them and their trajectory and growth. And I learned it the hard way with a friend that I loved very, very dearly. And I even had I had a few indicators of the Lord to even say, let her go. And I didn't want to. And it ended up being more more heart hurt than it needed to be. We were in, and it was without like I just want to be honorable. That's why I'm kind of tripping over words.
Totally.
We were in
Totally.
different spaces of revelation. Like as far as like not the book Revelation, that probably could have caused any number of friendships to be over. Um I was very much into going after the greater things. I had been touched by the Holy Spirit and set on fire. And the first few times that happens, you forget that maybe not everybody else is on that same plane. And I was wanting to take her with me in such an abrupt way that God had a process and a way gentler approach, and I didn't want to let her go. And it ended up being this really ugly mess of, well, you must think that you just have some higher understanding and you're going off the rails. And it was a huge break. Um, I'd say that's number one is don't try to pull people with you that are obviously not supposed to be there. And the other one is not to let fear create disconnect. And I'll say, I think, even though we've said that this has been painful, I really knew we were going to be okay. I don't know if you feel the
Yeah.
same way. I knew things were going to be okay, even in the midst of it being really painful. But that's because I've walked through similar things so many times with friends that I don't know in my life if God just has entrusted me into walking through these kind of things, but I have learned to not be afraid to have the conversations that might otherwise cause disconnect and do
Totally.
them in an honorable and kind way to say, hey, I hear you saying this, but I want you to hear my heart. And even if you don't come to understanding, you've at least had a conversation that doesn't allow disconnect to create a narrative. And
Yeah.
I know that we even did this, that there were a few specific conversations that were surrounding how one thing was being felt by one of us, but it was being translated in a way that was not at all intended that. But unless you have the conversation, you don't know. And fear
Yeah.
would say, if you have this conversation, you're going to severely tick person A off, or you're going to make it worse,
Yeah.
and not allowing fear a space to create that disconnected narrative allowed there to be clarity, if not full connection at the time, there was at least clarity and room for grace so that
Yeah.
when timing was right for both of us to come back into each other's lives, there wasn't a bunch of collateral damage because at least I didn't develop this bad narrative. I hope you didn't.
Yeah.
I don't
No.
think you did.
No.
And that, yeah, actually, that's the one that I feel like God's really resting on the most. Do not allow fear to keep you from having conversations that would otherwise cause disconnect.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I feel like it's so relevant because it's like so many times people, they don't know how to have the hard conversations. They don't know how to have the messy conversations. They don't know even how to navigate those, like even just healthy relational things, or like even if they're like what I'm trying to say, help me, Lord. The even if it is going to be a hard conversation, so many times people shy away from that instead of leaning in and navigating the messiness together and navigating the, oh, like, this is how I'm feeling. This is what's happening. Are you like willing to meet me in the like meet me in this conversation? And I think that even like that actually reflects like such like there's vulnerability in that, right? There's like, oh, like here's a part of my heart that I'm feeling, and I'm like, you could hurt my heart more if I reveal this to you. So it's like so vulnerable and it's so exposing. But like that's where the connection lies. And that's what I've like so appreciated about us and our conversations. And yeah, it just is like, oh, like here's my heart. And it's like so willing to be hurt by you, but that's like a risk that we take in relationship. And so many times people aren't willing to go there.
Which is sad when you think about if I've invested in you and allowed you into these intimate spaces, then I should feel safe to be able to have these conversations, right? And
Yeah.
there's just, I think there, one red flag that I'm just raising since this is a podcast is that you're not having these conversations with the people we just talked about 20 seconds ago that
Totally.
have been watching your Instagram reel and are pretty sure
Totally.
they're coming to your kid's graduation. No, these conversations are for your friends that you've given that intimacy, that relational equity, that you're going to fight for it. And I think that it would be weird if you didn't come to those points in
Yeah.
relationship that are that close,
Yeah.
because I have found that tension is where iron sharpens iron. So if you haven't come into these spaces, then I would be even asking the Lord, what is this friendship for in my life? And
Mm-hmm.
how come we haven't rubbed up against each other? And not that conflict always has to produce the good things. Like good things can come from just positive relational stuff. But I'm like sitting here and sifting through every really close friendship that I have, and we're in our little 40s. So we're
Yeah.
still kind of babies, but we're wise enough to say like we know stuff now. Um,
Yeah.
but of those friends that I've kept and I would consider people that I would fight through this with, every single one of them, I've gone through some type of conflict that has required hard, messy
Yeah.
conversations that I've either been the one that caused the pain or the one that's received the pain, and being willing to go there so that we don't hold any bitterness towards one another. Like you can't be productive if you've got a different narrative going on in the back of your mind, even though you're smiling. You can't do that, and God knows it.
Yeah, totally. So here's an interesting conversation. Like, what does it look like when it's like one friend is willing to go to those spaces and the other one isn't? Like, oh, like that, obviously that's where disconnection happens, and or it only just stays at certain level, and that's the depth of the friendship that each person is willing. But it's like, oh man, like it's vulnerable to navigate. Oh, okay, like I'm willing to go deeper. Here's my heart. Are you willing to go deeper with me? Like, yeah, do you want to speak to that?
I'm just thinking about how I've totally screwed this one up too in the past.
Yeah.
Charity knows that. So one part of my life and personality is that I'm very quick to obedience and through the process. So I don't do this anymore. So I'm trying to like disclaim the story I'm going to tell. When I would come into intersections like that years and years ago, and part of it was because I sustained so much relational pain and trauma that I'm healed from now, but I would shut down immediately. When I recognized that that relationship was no longer at the same level, I literally was known to be like, okay, it's been wonderful knowing you. Have a life, bless you, goodbye, gone.
Yeah.
And um at that stage, I also didn't know to what degree of influence and favor I actually carried. I was very self-deprecating and saw myself at a way lower level when the relationships that I was ending like this held me in a much, much higher degree, like mentorship level. And I was lucky enough to have people in my life that came and said, "You cannot do that." And even though you could justify, even biblically, why you're doing that, that is not relational. It's logical, but you've
Mhm.
completely taken the relational component out of it. So, what I learned from number one, listening to the people that are willing to say, you're wrong and you're better than that. Thank you, God, that He's put humility into me, that I learned to lean into not being afraid of having the conversations that would potentially cause disconnect. And I trust God and I trust that He likes the people that I love, loves the people more than I love them. That when
Yeah.
there's a time that you can sense that disconnect, I'm really careful with my language. And I do have the conversations of usually close enough to say, hey, it feels like there's a shift. And because I've walked it so many times, I tend to give that person an out because I know they're nervous. And I'm just thinking of one specific friend lately that I'm like, hey, I know things have shifted. I know that doesn't mean you love me less. But if this looks like maybe you need a season, and I don't even care how long that is to disconnect, I'm gonna move back. And if you need me, reach out. But I'm sensing this, and I want God to do everything in your sorry, this is really close because this was very recent. Um, so the short answer is that if you have the maturity, then walk into that friendship giving the person an out that's never been given grace to say, I don't know what to do with this friendship feeling like it's shifting or ending right now. And I feel like a bad person because because the world says that you should hold on to everybody and keep them forever. And that's not real. Then if you're mature enough, come into the conversation if I recognize a shift and God has good things for both of us. So the space doesn't mean there's disconnect. The space means there's different relational equity. And let's see where God's going with this instead of fighting for something that there's no more grace for.
Right. Yeah, that's so good. I love that. And it really is like honoring those ebbs and those flows. And, I think it's something that like I have, very few, like in a good way, quality, long term, like 15, 20-year friendships where there are ebbs and flows of different seasons where we're closer and more connected, and or other times where we don't talk as much or hang out as much. And yeah, it's it's hard to navigate, but it's so good. It's like, oh, like people, like for God so loved the world, like he loves us, like he is so willing. Like if Jesus was our example, like he was so willing to put his heart out there with some of his closest disciples and still be betrayed and to still be disappointed and to still be let down. And I think that that's, I don't know, like, yeah, I think so much our like as believers, our love, that's like what will be an example to the world, right? Like they will know you are my followers because of your love. And I think we should, like we church believers should be the example of friendship, should be the example of healthy relationships, should be the example of love, of this phileo love. Um, and a lot of times we aren't because we have a kind of that worldview of friendship. But I don't know, do you have any closing thoughts before we end this conversation?
Mm. My closing thoughts would be to be easy on yourself, to everybody listening. Like, because I'm sure that you'd get done listening to a podcast like this, and any person with a heart's like, oh no, where am I screwing this up? No, where are you loving well? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
most people's intentions are good.
Yeah.
Be easy on yourself and be willing to give a lot more grace to everybody because truly, I have found that I would say even 90%, and I get it, I'm in the heartland of the United States, but 90% of the time people are not out to hurt you, to cause disappointment, to frustrate, or to harm. They're just doing their best. And the
Totally.
faster that we can all come to that realization and not allow fear to dictate a narrative, I think the better off we will all be in mitigating our own relationships.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, friend, that's what we got for today. Thank you for chatting and for sharing your heart. And I'm really grateful for you and the journey that God has brought us on. And I'm excited to see what he continues to do.
Me too. I love you.
Love you. All right, you guys, thanks for joining us on this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, just kind of the deeper, raw, real conversations. Like these are some of the times, like the first times Lyndsie and I have even shared some of this stuff just over our last season. And I'm even just believing that for those of you who are listening or maybe watching on YouTube, that God is going to bring you into a space of such having deep and rich friendships that can stand the test of time, that can ebb and flow with the seasons that God brings each of you guys into, that there's such honor and grace within the ebbs and the flows. And yeah, just that we learn to love each other so, so well. So thanks for being here. You guys are meant for more, and we will see you next time.